Hi everyone, welcome to our latest Head in the Cloud series hosted by Citrus Global. Here with me today is Stéphane Gamard, who is the CTO at Quandoo. I'm sure you'll agree he's a very interesting chap, very passionate, very transparent, talented, also speaks 4 different languages fluently as well, Stéphane?
Trying to.
So yeah, obviously someone that's a man of many talents indeed. So let's jump into it, Stephen. So we've been talking now for a few weeks, but we're kind of coming to the out of lockdown for most people, and it's been a huge moment in everyone's lives. People saying we're living in a moment of history. But how did you find it? Throughout the kind of initial lockdown period, how did you find it? How were you, personally during that period?
It was a challenge. It still is a challenge. There are a couple of things that did not anticipate it. Luckily in IT, we're fairly acquainted to work from home times to times, but there's one thing that we never took into account is working from home when you have the entire home fully staffed with wife and kids. It's a complete different endgame. I think the best way to describe it is I was both extremely focused because in the hospitality business, we decided to cater to environment. We had a lot of work to do. We had great initiatives to try to help the restaurants that are part of the Quandoo network. And at the same time, I was extremely distracted, having the little one literally jumping onto my lap for meetings. So the entire company got to know my daughter.
Yeah, I experienced exactly the same. I think I know you said you've got an 18-month-old daughter. So I do as well as a 4-year-old. So it's wow. Trying to work was very difficult. But you said you're back in the office. You're back at home now, aren't you, for a period as well?
I am back at home. We had the unfortunate incident of having a contamination of our office. So taking care of our people, we're making sure that everything's in order. We've locked down the office for quite an amount of time and making sure that everybody feels safe and comfortable coming to the office. So we're not rushing in. We have learned a lot with respect to having kids at home. So we're making sure that our employees can shuffle their schedule as much as possible to accommodate for this.
Yeah, well, I think as I was mentioning to you, it's my little one's, my oldest one, so her sort of first day at school today. So hopefully, it seems like with more children going back to school.
Same here. And cross your fingers that the school stays open.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, my daughter's school actually sent me an email yesterday that they'd had a case of coronavirus in one of the year groups. So again, it's they're not sure whether they might need to to isolate that year group and things like that. So we don't know what's happened. I think this whole everybody still needs to be adaptable. This is not going away anytime soon, is it? So I think it's it's important for us to kind of continue with all the learns and everything that everybody's been getting, and kind of and build on top of those as well. Which I suppose leads me into my next question there. So I mean, while you were I mean, you mentioned there as well that you've learned a lot during lockdown. I mean, what were some of those lessons that you've learned?
The one thing that we learn is it's not a sprint. At the whole beginning of the story, we saw a lot of people bracing up for 2 weeks or 2 months, and it's detrimental. We have and today this is our philosophy, and this is the way that we're going forward. We're bracing not for a week, we're bracing for a year, for 2 years. It is to have an impact on our life. It might not be there to stay, but we have to play the game.
Yeah, I think that's a sensible approach. Like I said, because we just don't know what is going to happen. So sort of prepare for the worst, hope for the best, and prepare for the worst.
And literally having a pragmatic stake to do things. When we came back from vacation, our school asked us to be tested, and in retrospective, it's a very generous thing to do. In a way, because it impacts us, it impacts the children that are sharing the school with my daughter, it impacts the parents who have the children at their school. And it's something that we willingly and gladfully did, simply because it's very simple to do, and it can go a long way to help each other. So being very pragmatic, taking a step at a time, and trying to be the most accommodating possible with respect to work, with respect to life, with respect to family. That's the uptake of this entire period.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point actually, because I feel like well, a lot of the people I've spoken to, they've certainly in a leadership role like yourself, they have for the most part mentioned that or talked about that, is that trying to be more focused on the individual and kind of more accommodating, and also understanding of issues as well, because things happen. Yeah, everybody's situation is different, not not, and so therefore it's, if there is an issue, or somebody's performance has perhaps dipped or has gone off slightly, it's perhaps more of an idea to, to first ask why, then kind of, sort of, I suppose get the stick out and start kind of saying we need more. It's kind of understand, what's happening, what can, is there anything that we can help with? Is there anything I can help with? So I think that, there's the human element. During this period, it does feel like that people are kind of, remembering that.
There's a human element, and then there's a geography element. Berlin is a hub of many nationalities, of many people. Never have I felt so far away from my family, either from living on the other side of the planet. And this is something that, while my family still remains in Europe, we have to realize, what about our colleagues whose family is in the US or is in Asia or very far away? The world all of a sudden is inflated tremendously, and the fear of isolation, this sort of disconnection that you have with the possibility, the ability to just fly out and meet your loved one, is something that comes at a stark price.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, that's again a good point. I'd not thought about that. My family, I suppose, they are all sort of relatively local, but yeah, imagine if you had family that were 3,000 miles away or something, and that there was, there's very little possibility potentially of seeing them again for 2 or 3 more months. I mean, that must be very, very difficult for people in that situation. I suppose, look, interesting question. I've asked this one to a few people now, but I suppose it's putting yourself in a bit of an imaginary situation. If you could go back in time, so if you could jump in a time machine, is there anything you would have done differently? Is there anything you perhaps would have done to have prepared better for for what we've experienced in the last 6 months?
That's a really hard one. In all honesty, I'm not even sure we're still well prepared. It's a learning that we do on a day-to-day basis, pretty much on what is going on, how can we both survive, how can we cater to our ecosystem, how can we keep all of our colleagues engaged while being remote. The lack of social interaction is something that is very, very hard for a company. You're not having a coffee with someone, you're not having a cigarette break, you're not having a Friday afternoon beer. This entire level of socialization in your company has just disappeared. At the beginning, it spun up. We had a lot of virtual drinks.
Yeah,
great. Time that you're still alone with your beer, sitting on your deck, and you're like, cheers, everybody. The one learning, and it's the one that we put in action today, is patience. It's the one thing, is do not rush into things, take patience. We took the stand at Quandoo to follow both the WHO and the local government regulation, every time choosing the most conservative one and going with that one.
Okay.
That proved to be, in my opinion, a good choice, and we're still going with that philosophy. And we don't own these regulations, so we have to be patient. We have to be proactive. We have to be helping, pretty much.
Okay, that's interesting. So you were kind of obviously closely monitoring the WHO advice, and then the government, and then you said choosing the one that was the most conservative, so the safest option of those. Because I mean, I think that's been confusing for a lot of people. That the advice.
Isn't it? Do you wear a mask? Do you not wear a mask? Do you go to the office? Do you not go to the office? It's very, very it's crazy. And when your entire company is looking to the leadership for these answers, those answers, they have to be at maybe as right as they can get at the moment. They have to be truthful. They have to be
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah, I mean that's a great point actually, because yeah, and I think well, I would assume that kind of filters down to the employees of Quandoo to say actually you've got their best interest at heart. So you're following the advice to the point where it's the safest option for them and for for obviously for the company. You're not putting the company first in that sense. You're putting the individuals first, the humans first within that business.
We have to,
Yeah.
and especially Quandoo, again, being very international. We've also set up, and this is something that existed all the time in Quandoo, but we've also set up ways for all of the non-German speakers to be able to catch up, to understand what are the local regulations, what is going on in Berlin.
Right. I mean that's a really good initiative. I mean, if it's anything like here in the UK at the moment, I mean they just get updated so often, so regularly. You probably have to hold a meeting every day to kind of keep people
The
up to
initiative
speed.
is not mine. My German is way too poor. But thanks to that initiative, we were aware of what is going on in our own neighborhood.
Yeah, which is again is important, isn't it? Okay. With obviously it sounds like I think it's obviously the business. It sounds like the business has done a great job. Leadership has done a great job in putting the people first, and like you said, just being aware of what people's situations are. But which sounds like you've been very accommodating throughout this period. I mean, did you have any frustrations, or were there any frustrations about anything that was happening, or were you more of the opinion it's out of your control? Yes, you're not going to kind of get frustrated about these things.
The tough frustration is social interaction. As like interacting with your colleague, the bandwidth of being there, the bandwidth of spending time is just so much larger. We had to revert and we had to ramp up our habits, our process into documentation, into asynchronous communication, which is not an easy thing to do. A lot of things get lost. A lot of things you lose contact, you lose touch with certain initiatives, with certain teams. The realization that this socialization is now a proactive role that you have to undertake is something that really frustrated me. I took it for granted. I took it that it was easy for me on a daily basis to connect with all of my colleagues, and now it's actually hard. And I have to take into consideration. I cannot just ring anybody up at any given time on a whim to ask questions or so on. It's the entire logistic of this social interaction is a lot harder.
Yeah, I get that. And obviously, look, from interacting with you and speaking with you, you're a very personable guy. I know you've got there's a big team in place as well, of which that sit under your room. It's 97, 95 people, something like that.
Around 90 people.
Yeah, and so and if you're like a lot of leaders, the ability to walk around to somebody's desk and have a 5-minute conversation with them about what's going on here, what's going on there, that is completely taken away. And I've spoken to a lot of people saying they're back to back on Zoom meetings, 15 minutes from 9 to 5. So just trying to schedule in a time to speak to someone for 5 minutes is a challenge in itself, isn't it?
It can be. And the whole culture of asynchronous is tricky. What is it that you're going to read your Slack message right now, rather in 5 minutes or tomorrow?
Yeah, that's a good point actually. I mean, I suppose it's and there's a lot. There can also be a lot of distractions you're getting in your Slack messages, your emails, your Zoom calls, telephone calls. It's and then so you hopefully now not so much, but with your children then jumping on your lap and wanting attention, it must have been time management must have been a skill that you've got even better at as well throughout this whole period.
I personally was pretty lucky with this on the time management, but we've had employees that were hammered down, and this is something that we realized very, very early. The work from home with the children is a complete different ballgame. And in my opinion, The ones that we entirely forgot about and during this lockdown are not the workers or not the first responders or not us, they're the children. We did
Right.
not manage the entire children situation very well. It came too much of a surprise as an unknown.
Yeah, I agree. I can see that. I agree that. I think personally, and I'm sure you probably felt similar. You know, I don't know if maybe you did, maybe not, but I'm assuming you probably did. I was kind of feeling guilty. For I was not able to be as effective as I would like from a work perspective. Yes, definitely wasn't
Exactly.
being as effective. I definitely wasn't being as effective as I would like to have been as a father, as a dad. And yeah, I know my wife was feeling the same challenges as well because she was working from home. And so there was this kind of constant cycle of like, I feel guilty about not being effective at work. I feel guilty about not being as good a dad as I'd like to have been.
I mean, a lot of patience has been eroded. Like it erodes your patience over and over and
Yeah,
over again.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I mean, I suppose moving forward, obviously like I said, we've learned a lot, and I think there's been a lot of good that has come out of this period as well. Like some of the things we've touched on. I mean, what do you think is here to stay?
It's an interesting question. On the business side, I honestly don't know. I think it's way too early to figure that out. We're not even out of the pandemic. We're barely bracing down for lockdown that might come back down or not. In terms of business, what's come down is cautiousness for the next X amount of months/years. At a personal level, what's come down of it is the stark realization that we've suspended the rat race for X amount of months. And during that suspension, you come back to figure out what is important to you.
Yeah.
And it's a stark realization that, am I actually doing what's important? Am I doing what I want? Is in my personal example, the stark realization that my family was so far away it's daunting.
Yeah.
I woke up and I'm like, oh my God, I can't get to my parents if they need me. I can't do that. So, and this is something that I see in my social circles of friends, collaborators. There is going to be, in my opinion, there's going to be a very strong realization of what are my values. And I'm not talking about what are my values on how I want to work. What are my values about my life? And
Yeah.
how do I connect to those values with my work?
Yeah. That's
That's
interesting.
something that, yeah.
Yeah, I think there has been a change in a lot of people's mentality around that. I was reading an article this morning actually, I mean London and most, I'm sure like most city centres around the world are all kind of not, I suppose, pretty deserted. There's tremendously less amount of people in the CBDs than there would normally be. And the article was saying it's not that people are afraid to go into the city centre. They're not afraid of COVID. They're afraid of their life going back to the way it was before COVID, which is what's keeping them away.
Yeah, we've had a glimpse of what is it that to suspend that activity, to question or what we're doing, and I think it brought some very interesting insights. If you look at, I don't know, pollution levels or CO2 levels in major cities, you realize, if we just stop, if we calm down, if we chill, it's going to go down. So there's certain things that stick in the back of your mind, and maybe I can do it differently. Maybe there's something else that I can do.
Yeah. I think that, and that's and businesses are kind of figuring that out as well. So I think as we go through this, I mean obviously there are thousands and thousands of businesses that haven't changed their way of working for probably 25, 30 years, and they've been forced to change them overnight. And and obviously, but even startup businesses, scale up businesses, every single business out there has been forced to rethink things and kind of reimagine the way they work. So it's I think moving forward that we're going to see a lot more innovation. I feel like there is going to be a lot of changes probably across blanket across
there will be.
pretty much. I mean, every industry really,
and including on the remoteness of work. Remote is something that is new for a large amount of people.
Yeah.
It's not something that is that new for tech or for IT,
True.
because of accommodation and the way that people want to work. But there was a huge spike of full remote, entirely having a company that does not exist, that's entirely remote at the beginning of the COVID, at the beginning of the pandemic. And as we move into it, as we see the consequences of a couple of months of isolation today, that movement, in my opinion, has been tempered down a bit. There's a stark realization that socialization, communication with your colleague, with your peers, plays an important role of your day-to-day work on your lifestyle at the office. It doesn't need to be on a daily basis, but you do need that interaction to build up the bonds between colleagues.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I 100% agree with that, because we've seen that ourselves as well. So and I know that there will, that undoubtedly moving forward, there'll be tons and tons of businesses that are remote first, that are 100% remote, and that don't have a physical office, undoubtedly. But I think that the biggest challenge is going to be building up those personal relationships, building up the rapport, among those colleagues, because it is. Although we're kind of talking now, and it's personable, it's not the same as being in an office. It's not the same as sharing a coffee with someone, having a beer with someone.
Exactly. There's a repetition problem. There's a bandwidth problem. There's all of these differences that make it that our office they have evolved into catering to the culture, and translating that culture online. I mean, is tricky. I'm not entirely convinced that all of the aspects of our cultures can be transferred online.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. Okay, great. And I mean, moving on from that, I mean, is there any any sort of advice, I suppose, that you would offer to anybody, or any advice given to any other businesses based on your experiences? And is there anything that specifically kind of springs to mind as any nuggets of gold, or as
Be patient, extremely patient. Be focused. Stop reading the news. I mean, seriously, that's one thing to stop doing.
Yeah.
But that's always been the case. Be patient, be focused, and touching on something that you said, and it's something that we've had in Quandoo as well. Don't feel threatened. Don't feel stressed that if you cannot perform, quote quote perform, or if you cannot have the sheer presence that you intended to have to begin with.
Right.
It is a novel situation. Most of your management, of your leadership will understand, and they are themselves in the same shoes. So think of accommodation, think of taking a breath, and go from there.
I like it. Some sage advice there, Stéphane. And finally, last question for you. As part of this kind of head in the clouds conversation we're having, is there anything specific, or moving forwards from a talent or a recruitment perspective, that you could think of that you would like to see, or that you would ask for moving forwards from a talent partner to help with all of this?
That's a trick part. That's a trick one. There's one word that comes to mind, is considerate. Be considerate as a hiring partner of the hurdles and the moment that is impacting a company. It's not because a company has five job opening on their career page that they're actually looking for. Companies today, they might be downsizing. Companies might be in saving cash absolutely to be able to get out of the pandemic. There are some talent partners that are extremely aggressive, and they pick up the phone and like, I see you have this, and I've sent you 5 CVs and so on. It will put whoever is in charge of the team of hiring, or the hiring manager, into an awkward position. Because yes, every company has opening. We have turnover, we have plans and so on. But we've had to be considerate with these plans with respect to our current employees, with respect to the survival of the company, and how do we move forward. And that's a hard one.
So as you say, be I suppose considerate, patient as well. You know,
Exactly.
as you know, along the theme we've been talking. And just mindful of of the situation, because I mean look, every person, every company are different, and like you say, some companies might have 10 vacancies on the website, but they might also be looking making them potentially having to make a round of redundancies, which is another consideration and things like that. So it's just, I suppose, trying to take some of those learns that we've all had during this period and just trying to remember that there's a lot going on in
There's a lot going on. If it's
everywhere.
going on for you, there are chances it's going on for others as well. And really, that's the uptake of the entire thing. You're not the only one affected. Everybody's affected.
Exactly. Again, Stefan, this has been great. I really appreciate your time in and agreeing to do this. I think that's been really interesting. Hopefully, it's been insightful for everyone that's watched this. If you're not connected to Stefan, or if you're not check him out on LinkedIn. He's I think it's well worth dropping by his page. And thank you all for watching. And Stefan, thanks again.
Thank you very much. Thank you.